He was already dressed when the betrayal began. Caelan Vire stood at the center of the Blackmere Grand Ballroom, 500 guests seated around him, chandelier light pouring down like judgment. Silver ceremonial robes. Hair combed clean. Hands folded. Waiting. The ceremony was supposed to start at 8. It was 8:43. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke directly to him. They whispered to each other instead, eyes sliding toward him and away again, the way people look at an accident they don't want to admit they're watching. Caelan couldn't hear the words. But he had spent his entire life reading rooms. He knew. Then the screen dropped. It descended slowly from the ceiling, massive and white, positioned above the floral arch where Caelan was supposed to receive his engagement ring. A murmur rolled through the crowd. Guests shifted in their seats. Someone near the back laughed nervously. The footage started without warning. Hotel hallway. Timestamp. Dreven Thorne, mafia heir, Caelan's fiancé of 2 years, stepping out of an elevator in a tailored jacket. Laughing. Arm around another man. The kind of easy, comfortable laugh a person only makes when they feel completely safe. The suite door closed behind them. The ballroom went completely still. Then it didn't. Whispers exploded into noise. Chairs scraped. Guests covered their mouths. Someone near the front row laughed, actually laughed, before catching themselves. A man in a gray suit leaned toward his companion and said something that made them both shake their heads. Caelan stood perfectly straight. His hands did not shake. Not visibly. He kept his eyes forward, fixed on a single point past the crowd, and breathed through it the way he had learned to breathe through everything. Slowly. Evenly. Like a person who had already survived worse. He had not. But they didn't need to know that. His foster uncle Bertram Vire rose from the front row. Not to defend him. To distance himself. Caelan watched the man straighten his jacket and step away from the family table without once making eye contact. That was the part that cut deepest. Then his foster Aunt Darlene crossed the floor. She grabbed his wrist. Yanked the gold engagement bracelet loose so hard the clasp broke. Held it up for a moment like it was evidence. Then dropped it on the marble floor and looked directly at him with a face that held no apology. "A mute omega," she said loud enough for the front rows. "Was lucky to be chosen at all." Nobody defended him. Not the servants who had known him for 7 years. Not the cousins who had eaten at his table every holiday. Not a single voice in that room of 500 people said one word in his direction. Hi viewers. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you fully trusted, and the people around you just stayed quiet? Drop your answer in the comments right now. Caelan turned and walked toward the service corridor. Not running. Walking. He pushed through the side door and stepped into the night air, and the rain hit him immediately, soaking through the silver robes in seconds. He kept moving until he reached the iron gate at the back of the property, and then he stopped because his leg said stop and his chest said stop and everything in his body said stop. He pressed one hand flat against the cold metal and stood there. The rain came down hard. A black sedan sat idling 10 feet away. Caelan had not called anyone. He had no one to call. The driver's door did not open. The back door did. A man in a white suit stepped out. Not rushing. He moved like someone who had all the time in the world and had chosen to spend it here. He opened an umbrella and walked to where Caelan stood and held it over both of them without saying anything. He was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small notepad. Uncapped a pen. Wrote 4 words. Turned it around. Marry me instead. Caelan stared at the words. Then he looked up at the man's face. Calm eyes. No desperation in them. No pity either, which mattered more than Caelan could explain. The rain hammered the umbrella above them. Inside the ballroom behind him, He could still hear the noise of 500 people processing his humiliation. Caelan took the pen. He wrote one word beneath the man's offer. Why? The man, Lucien Vale, though Caelan didn't know that name yet, took the notepad back. Considered it. Then wrote his answer and held it up. Caelan read it. Read it again. And somewhere deep in his chest, past the cold and the rain and the broken bracelets still lying on marble behind him, something shifted. He nodded once. Lucien folded the notepad, placed it back in his jacket, and gestured toward the open car door with one steady hand. The sedan pulled away from the gate. And in the distance, past the harbor, past the city lights smearing in the rain, a road opened up that Caelan had never seen before. He didn't know yet what was waiting at the end of it. The car didn't go to a hotel. It didn't go downtown. It headed toward the harbor. Caelan sat in the back seat with rain still drying on his face, watching the city change outside the window. The clean glass towers gave way to older buildings. Brick. Iron fences. Streetlights spaced further apart. The kind of neighborhood where people minded their business because they had learned the hard way that curiosity was expensive. He watched Lucien. The man sat on the opposite side of the seat, not crowding him, not staring. He had folded his hands in his lap and was looking out his own window like the night was something worth paying attention to. He had not spoken. He had not tried to explain. Caelan appreciated that more than he could write down. He pulled out his small personal notepad, the one he carried everywhere, worn at the corners, and wrote, "Where are we going?" Lucien glanced at it. Took the notepad briefly. Wrote, "Home." Then handed it back. Caelan frowned. Everyone in Blackmere City knew the name Lucien Vale. Not from power. From pity. He was the cautionary story rich families told their sons, a man from a decent bloodline who had apparently burned through his inheritance, lost 3 business ventures, and ended up managing a small loading operation at the outer docks. No alpha connections. No territory. No standing. The kind of man Dreven Thorne would not have acknowledged in an elevator. And yet here he was in a pressed white suit at 9 in the evening with a calm face and a clean car, offering marriage to a man he barely knew. That didn't add up. The car slowed. Caelan expected a small building. An apartment block, maybe. Something modest. Instead, the driver turned onto a road that curved upward along the harbor cliff. The road was narrow and unmarked. Trees on both sides. Then a wall appeared, stone, old, well-maintained, and iron gates set back from the road. The gates opened before the car stopped. Caelan sat forward. The estate that came into view was not a cottage. It was not modest. It was a full cliffside property set behind its own grounds, restored stone exterior, warm light in the upper windows, a small fountain in the motor court that ran clean despite the rain. He looked at Lucien. Lucien was not looking back. He was already opening his door. Inside, the house was warm and quiet. No staff rushing around. A single attendant took their coats. The entry hall had high ceilings, dark wood floors, bookshelves that went up past where a person could comfortably reach. Caelan stood in the middle of it and didn't move. Lucien stopped a few feet away and waited. Caelan wrote, "You're supposed to be broke." Lucien read it. One side of his mouth moved, not quite a smile. He took the notepad. Wrote, "That was intentional." Caelan stared at those 3 words for a long time. Then he wrote, "Why would someone hide this?" Lucien's expression shifted. Something passed through his eyes. Not pain exactly. More like a person who had carried a specific weight for so long they had stopped noticing it until someone pointed at it directly. He wrote back, "To stay alive." The house settled around them. Rain on the windows. Fire going in the next room. Caelan looked around the entry hall, at the books and the old portraits and the space that felt like it had been preserved rather than decorated. Like someone had protected it carefully for a long time. He wrote one more thing. You still owe me an answer to why. Lucien took the notepad. Read Caelan's words from earlier in the car, his question about why Lucien had offered marriage to a stranger in the rain. He wrote an answer this time. A real one. Caelan read it. His chest tightened. He didn't respond right away. He folded his notepad and tucked it back into his pocket and stood there looking at the fire through the open doorway. Then he nodded. They were married 3 hours later. A civil process. One witness. Quiet paperwork in a private office that smelled like old books. No ceremony. No guests. No crowd watching. By morning, it was filed. By noon, the gossip had already spread across the city. The headline that ran on 3 separate social accounts read the same way: Discarded mute Omega weds dockside failure. How far can one man fall? Caelan read it at the kitchen table while Lucien made coffee. He set the phone down. Looked out the window at the harbor below the cliff. Lucien placed the cup in front of him without being asked. Then went back to the stove. Caelan wrapped both hands around the warm cup. Outside, past the trees and the iron fence, the road curved back toward the city. Back toward the ballroom. Back toward everyone who had watched and said nothing. He didn't look that direction. He looked at the water. That evening, Caelan walked the upper hall of the house and found a room he hadn't seen on the first pass. The door was unlocked. He pushed it open. Light from a skylight. Blank canvases stacked along one wall. Brushes sorted in cups. Paint organized by color, uncapped lids cleaned. A stool positioned in the center of the room facing the largest window overlooking the cliff. He stood in the doorway. On the small table near the entrance was a notepad. Lucien's handwriting. Yours. Do whatever you want with it. Caelan pressed his fingers to the doorframe. He didn't cry. He was past the point where tears came easily. But his hands stayed there a long time. He stepped inside. Downstairs, in the east study, Lucien sat at his desk in the dark. His phone screen lit his face with a single incoming message. He read it. Then he stood and walked to the window and looked at the same harbor Caelan was watching from one floor above. His jaw was tight. The message read: Your brothers are losing the city. How long are you going to let them bleed? 8 months. That's how long it took for Caelan to stop listening for the sound of things going wrong. He woke up every morning in the same room, same light through the same window, same quiet. No raised voices. No doors slammed to make a point. No one walking into a room with the energy of someone who wanted a reaction and planned to manufacture one if they didn't get it. Just quiet. Actual quiet. The kind with texture. Birds, harbor wind, the sound of something cooking downstairs. Lucien learned sign language in 3 weeks. Full fluency took longer. But within the first month he could hold a real conversation with his hands, and he practiced every day without being asked and without making it a performance. He didn't announce when he learned a new sign. He just used it. That mattered. Caelan started sleeping through the night somewhere around month 3. He painted most days. The room Lucien had prepared stayed exactly as it had been. Caelan rearranged it slightly, moved the stool, added his own organization to the brushes, and the light through the skylight changed with the seasons in a way that kept giving him new things to look at. He painted the harbor. He painted the city lights blurred by rain. He painted rooms from memory that no longer existed and rooms from this house that did. He painted the quality of silence in certain hours. Nobody reviewed his work. Nobody judged it. Lucien came in sometimes and looked and said nothing except occasionally, "This one is strong." In sign. And then left without making it into a conversation. That was also something Caelan had to adjust to. He had spent so long in rooms where everything was a performance that simple honesty felt strange. Not suspicious. Just unfamiliar. Like standing in a space with high ceilings after years of rooms where you had to keep your head down. He was getting used to it. The world outside was doing something else entirely. News traveled slowly to the Cliff House, filtered through headlines and second-hand conversations, but the pattern was impossible to miss after a while. 3 of Blackmere's most established criminal networks had gone quiet between month 2 and month 6. Not loud collapses, no shootouts, no arrests that made the front page. More like a machine losing power without announcement. Suddenly a port route was gone. Suddenly a name stopped appearing in financial records. Suddenly a judge who had been untouchable for 12 years submitted a resignation letter. Caelan followed it. He wasn't certain why. He told himself it was habit. He had always read closely, paid attention, noticed gaps between what was said and what was true. But there was a specific direction the news kept pointing, and he was aware of it. Lucien was gone 3 or 4 nights a week. He never explained where. He didn't lie about it either. He simply came back in the early hours, clean and composed, sat at the kitchen table with coffee, and by 7 in the morning he was present and unhurried and available for breakfast if Caelan came down. He never brought whatever he'd been doing into the house. Caelan respected the line. He didn't push past it. But the line kept moving. Month 7. Caelan came downstairs at 2 in the morning because he couldn't sleep. Not from nightmares this time, just restlessness, and walked past the east study and saw light under the door. He stopped. The door was ajar. He didn't open it. He looked through the gap. One wall of the study had been cleared of books. In their place, a large pinboard. Maps with overlay markings. Printed photographs. Names in black marker connected by lines and arrows. Columns of numbers. Port locations. A timeline running left to right across the center. Lucien was standing with his back to the door, hands braced on the desk, reading something. Caelan stood in the hallway. He looked at the board. His eyes moved across it the way they moved across a canvas, slowly, reading everything, understanding structure before detail. Then his eyes stopped. In the center of the board, circled in red, was a photograph. He recognized the face. He stepped back from the door. Walked back upstairs without making a sound. Got into bed and lay on his back and looked at the ceiling. His hands were calm. His mind was not. Because the face at the center of Lucien Vale's operation board, the one circled and labeled and marked as the final target, was Dreven Thorn. Caelan did not say anything the next morning. He came downstairs at the usual time. Lucien was at the stove. They signed about small things. Whether the coffee was too strong, the weather over the harbor, a painting Caelan had left half-finished near the window. Nothing about the board. Nothing about the name in the circle. But Caelan had learned early that silence could be a choice rather than an absence. He chose it carefully that morning. He needed time to think before he brought words into it. So he watched. He had always been good at watching. What he had noticed over 8 months, and what clarified now with new weight, was that Lucien was not reckless. Everything the man did was paced. Measured. He was never in a rush. He never made noise about what he was doing. He moved through his work the way certain craftsmen moved through difficult material, slowly, with full attention, making no unnecessary cuts. That was not the behavior of anger. That was the behavior of someone who had planned for a long time. Caelan went to the art room after breakfast. He stood at the window looking at the harbor, but he wasn't seeing it. He was reviewing what he knew. He knew Lucien was not poor. That had been obvious from night 1. He knew the Vale name. The triplets, Rydor, Severin, Kaylees, had been fixtures in Blackmere's high world for years. Dominant family. Alpha bloodline. Real territory. The kind of name that moved through a room before the person did. He had never heard of a fourth brother. That absence was specific. People didn't simply forget a veil. Which meant the absence was constructed. Someone had removed Lucien Vale from the record. Caelan picked up a brush. Put it down. Picked it up again. He thought about the scars. He had seen them in month 2, Lucien coming out of the washroom with a shirt not yet buttoned, turning to reach for something on the shelf, and the light catching the marks across his back and shoulder. Long old. The kind that come from something deliberate, not accidental. Lucien had not been self-conscious about them. He hadn't hidden them or explained them. He'd simply continued reaching for the shelf and moved on. Caelan had not asked? He was asking now, inside his own head. And the picture forming was not a complicated one. It was actually quite clear, in the way that things become clear once you stop trying to avoid what the evidence points to. Lucien had been removed. Declared dead, or close enough. And instead of accepting it, he'd left. Built something offshore, out of reach, over years. And then he came back. But he hadn't come back with noise. He hadn't announced himself. He had come back with paperwork, with quiet financial moves, with routes closed and assets frozen and names crossed off a list in an order only someone with complete patience could maintain. He had come back to finish something. The question was what Caelan's place was in it. He turned from the window. The brush was still in his hand. He set it down on the tray and walked out of the art room and down the hall to the east study. He knocked. One knock. Clear. Lucien opened the door. He was in a dark shirt, sleeves rolled. Behind him the board was partially covered, but only partially. He hadn't expected Caelan up here mid-morning. Caelan held up his notepad. I saw the board. Lucien looked at the words. Then looked at Caelan's face. He stepped back and opened the door fully. Caelan walked in. He looked at the board directly. Not stealing glances, not pretending. He stood in front of it and read what was visible. Port routes. Company names. Financial structures. And at the center, Dreven's photo. Circled. The word next written beneath it in black marker. He turned. Wrote, Tell me what's true. Lucien was quiet for a moment. Then he sat on the edge of the desk and looked at Caelan with an expression that was the most unguarded thing Caelan had seen from him yet. And he began to sign. Lucien spoke with his hands for a long time. He did not rush. He signed carefully, cleanly, the way a person does when what they are saying matters too much to say carelessly. He was the fourth brother. That was where it started. The Vale family had 4 sons. The triplets, Rydor, Severin, Kayleys, were older by 6 years. Public, powerful, built for attention. Lucien was the youngest. Quieter. Sharper in different ways. Where his brothers dominated rooms, Lucien read them. He had been the one doing the financial architecture behind the Vale operation for years. The offshore accounts. The trade routing. The legal insulation that kept the family's name clean while their territory expanded. He had built it carefully, brick by brick, starting at 19. Then something went wrong. A deal. A miscalculation, not his, but close enough to him that blame could be attached. And there were people inside the Vale network, trusted ones, who had decided Lucien was more valuable as a liability than as an asset. He was 23 when it happened. A warehouse on the East Docks. A meeting that was supposed to be routine. 3 men who were not there for business. He survived. Barely. Someone found him. Anonymous. Didn't ask questions. Stabilized him, gave blood, and left before he regained consciousness. The clinic had no name on record for the donor. Just a blood-type match and a note that said, he's going to be fine. He didn't know who it was, For years he didn't know. He disappeared after that. Let the Vale name carry the story that he was dead. Moved offshore. Built quietly. Learned everything he had always suspected about the people who had moved against him. Documented it. Waited. He waited 7 years. Then he came back. Not to fight publicly. Not to claim a title. He came back to correct the record, financially and structurally, in a way that couldn't be undone by a single decision or a well-placed lie. He came back to take apart what had been built on his supposed death, piece by piece, from the outside in. And Dreven Thorne was not incidental to the story. Dreven's family had been present that night at the warehouse. Not directly. But the connection existed, documented, in accounts Lucien had spent 7 years tracing. Dreven wasn't the man who gave the order. He was the man who benefited from it, whose family's territory expanded after Lucien disappeared, who had absorbed certain port contracts that had previously belonged to the Vale operation. He had built his empire partly on the assumption that Lucien Vale was dead. Caelan stood in the study and read all of this in Lucien's hands. He did not interrupt. When Lucien stopped, Caelan was quiet for a moment. Then he wrote on his notepad and held it up. When did you find out it was me? Lucien looked at the words. Then he signed, 6 months ago. The clinic had a partial record. A sketch one of the staff remembered. I ran it through every contact I had until I found the connection. He paused. Then signed, I had already asked you to marry me by then. Caelan looked at him. Lucien did not look away. He kept signing. That night at the ballroom gate, I was there because I had been watching Dreven's network. I knew about the engagement. I knew about you. When the ceremony collapsed, I made a decision. Caelan wrote, what decision? Lucien signed, that the man who had saved my life deserved better than standing in the rain outside a room that had just humiliated him. He paused again. Then, I didn't plan the marriage as strategy. I want you to know that. Caelan sat with that for a moment. He had been waiting, somewhere underneath all of this, to find the catch. The calculation. The place where his role in this story became instrumental rather than real. He was familiar with being useful to people. He was not familiar with being chosen. He wrote slowly, why tell me now? Lucien was still for a beat. Then, because what comes next is public. And I would rather you know the truth from me than watch it unfold, and wonder what was real. The house was quiet around them. Rain had started again outside, softer this time. The harbor was visible through the east window, gray and wide. Caelan looked at the board. At the maps and the names and the years of work laid out in lines and circles. At Dreven's face in the center. Then he looked at Lucien. He picked up his pen. Wrote one thing. Tore the page gently from the notepad and set it on the desk in front of Lucien. Then he walked out of the study and back down the hall to the art room. He sat on the stool by the window and picked up his brush and held it without painting. Behind him, in the study, Lucien read the page. It said, finish what you started. I'll be here when it's done. Lucien folded the paper once. Pressed it flat. Then turned back to the board. 2 days later, an envelope arrived at the front door. Black seal. Heavy cardstock. Addressed to both of them. Caelan brought it to Lucien. Lucien opened it, read it, and set it on the table between them. An invitation. Winter's Sovereign Gala. The largest gathering of power in Blackmere, city officials, legacy families, financial heads. Everyone who mattered and everyone who wanted to. Attendance was not optional for people at a certain level. And Lucien Vale, it turned out, was at a very specific level. Caelan looked at the invitation. Then at Lucien. Lucien signed, the city is about to find out we're still here. And somewhere across town, in a penthouse office surrounded by lawyers and accountants he was about to lose, Dreven Thorn received the same envelope. He opened it. Read the name on the host line. And for the first time in 8 months, Dreven Thorn felt the room get very small. The gala was already full when they arrived. Not full like a crowded room. Full like a held breath. 300 people standing inside the Blackmere Winter Sovereign Hall, crystal overhead, black marble underfoot, every name in the city present and accounted for. Politicians. Legacy families. Financial heads who hadn't been seen publicly in years. All of them dressed, all of them positioned, all of them watching the entrance the way people watch a door they've been warned about. The doors opened. Lucien walked in first. White suit. Red tie. Gold watch catching the chandelier light at his wrist. Not hurrying. Not performing. Just walking the way a man walks when he owns the floor and has no interest in announcing it. Then Caelan. Crimson silk. Clean lines. A cane held loosely in his right hand, carved dark wood, gold detail at the grip, chosen not for need but because he had decided tonight he would carry something beautiful. His face was composed. Eyes forward. The kind of quiet that is not absence. That is arrival. The room shifted. Not loudly. These were people trained to control their reactions. But the shift happened, heads turning, shoulders angling, conversations dropping mid-sentence as recognition moved through the crowd like electricity through a wire. Lucien Vale. Alive. Here. And beside him, the man half this room had laughed at 8 months ago. Caelan felt their eyes. He had spent his whole life feeling eyes. The pitying kind, the mocking kind, the dismissive kind that flicked across him and moved on without landing. These were different. These had weight to them. Recalculation. He kept walking. A server offered champagne. Lucien took 2 glasses, handed one to Caelan, and they moved into the room without stopping. People stepped back. Not dramatically. Just slightly. The way a crowd adjusts when it realizes the center of gravity has shifted. Caelan noticed. He also noticed Dreven Thorn. He was across the room near the east column, standing with 2 associates, holding a glass he hadn't touched. He was dressed well, he always dressed well, but his face was doing something complicated. Controlling something. Dreven had always been good at composure. He had practiced it his whole life, the same way he had practiced charm and confidence, and the precise management of rooms. But composure is hard to maintain when the math has changed. He saw Caelan. His expression didn't break. But it moved. Just slightly. The jaw tightened. The eyes recalculated. Caelan looked at him for exactly 3 seconds. Then looked away. That was a choice. Deliberate. Unhurried. 30 minutes passed. Conversations at the gala moved the way they always moved at these events, in orbits, careful approaches, power displayed through proximity. Lucien was approached by 6 different men in that time. He spoke to each of them briefly, cleanly, without revealing anything. Caelan watched from the side, nursing his drink. A man he didn't recognize leaned close to the person beside him and said loud enough, "That's the mute one." Married him out of nowhere. Strange business. The person beside him didn't respond. Because the person beside him had just seen Lucien look directly across the room at the man who had spoken. One look. That was all. The man went quiet. Then Dreven came. He crossed the floor slowly, casually, the way someone approaches when they want to appear unconcerned. He stopped a few feet from Caelan and glanced around to confirm no one was directly within earshot. Then he said low and even, "I was forced that night. The video. Someone set it up. I need you to understand that." Caelan looked at him. He waited. He let the silence sit long enough for Dreven to feel it. Then he set his glass down on a nearby tray, turned to face him fully, and signed. Slowly. Visibly. Open hands, clean motion, making sure anyone in the surrounding area who happened to look would see every word. You were willing. He didn't need a voice. The room noticed. A woman nearby touched her companion's arm. Two men near the pillar stopped talking. The space around them got very quiet very fast. Dreven's jaw moved. He opened his mouth. Before he could speak, sound filled the hall. Not music. Trumpets. 3 sharp notes, formal, old form announcement style. The kind used only at events of specific significance, when someone of a specific rank was entering. The crowd parted. Everyone turned toward the main doors. 3 men walked in. And the entire hall, 300 people, legacy names, city power, untouchable money, went completely silent. Every person in that room knew those 3 faces. Rydor. Severin. Caelan. The Vale triplets. The Alpha Kings of Blackmere. They had not attended this gala in 4 years. They were here now. And they were walking directly toward Caelan Vire. Nobody moved. That was the thing. In a room full of people trained to manage their reactions, every single person stopped completely. Glasses held mid-raise. Conversations ended at syllables. Even the servers near the walls went still. Because the Vale triplets did not make social appearances without meaning. Rydor walked at the center. Tallest of the 3. Dark coat, silver detail at the collar. Face like something carved rather than grown. Angular, controlled, the kind of face that had learned to give nothing away. He was the eldest by minutes, and he had carried that designation like a weight he had chosen to keep. Severin on his left. Broader. A jaw that had been broken once and healed slightly wrong, which made him look permanently unbothered by pain, because he was. He did not smile in public. He simply moved through rooms the way weather moved through open spaces, without asking permission. Caelan's on the right. The quietest of the 3. Lean, precise eyes that moved through a crowd the way a surgeon moves through a procedure, cataloging, assessing, never rushing. He had spoken publicly twice in the last calendar year. Both times, markets adjusted. 3 men. One direction. They were not heading toward Lucien. They were heading toward Caelan. The crowd registered this. You could see it moving through the room like a current. Heads turning, eyes tracking, people leaning toward the person next to them to confirm what they were seeing was what they were seeing. Caelan stood still. He held his cane. He breathed. He did not step back. The triplets stopped 3 feet in front of him. Rydor looked at Caelan for a moment, not examining, not testing. Just seeing. The way a person looks at something they have been waiting a long time to find. Then he lowered himself to one knee. The sound in the room was nothing. Absolute nothing. Severin knelt beside him. Caelan, precise, unhurried, knelt last. 3 Alpha Kings. On their knees. In front of a mute Omega who had been publicly mocked in this city 8 months ago. Rydor spoke. His voice was not loud. It didn't need to be. In a room this silent, a whisper carries to the ceiling. You saved what we could not. That was all he said. But in that room, with 300 witnesses and every legacy name in Blackmere staring at the moment, it was enough. Caelan looked at the 3 of them. His face did not change dramatically. He was not the kind of person who performed emotion. But something in his eyes moved, a shift, small and real, the kind that happens when a thing you have carried alone for a long time is finally named by someone else. He had not known they knew. He had not known anyone knew. He looked at Lucien. Lucien was standing 5 feet back. Arms loose at his sides. He had known this was coming, that was clear. He had let it happen without announcement, without engineering a reaction from the crowd. He had just let the truth land on its own. He signed to Caelan, small and private, just for him. they asked. I said yes. Across the room, a glass hit the floor. Nobody looked for the source. They already knew. Dreventhorn stood at the east column and watched three of the most powerful men in the city kneel before the person he had abandoned in the rain. His hands were at his sides. His face had finally stopped performing. What was underneath wasn't guilt. Not yet. It was the specific, cold recognition of a man who has just understood, fully, with no room left for revision, that he has made a permanent error. The kind that cannot be walked back. The triplets rose. Rydor stepped to Lucien and the two men held each other's arms briefly, not a handshake, something older than that. A thing between brothers who had not stood in the same room in years and had both carried the weight of that absence. Severin looked at Caelan and gave a single nod. Caelan said nothing, which from him meant everything. Then the gala resumed. Slowly. Carefully. The way a room resumes when it knows it has just witnessed something it will be talking about for years. But the conversation had changed. The entire gravity of the room had shifted. People who had dismissed the name Caelan Vire, who had whispered, who had laughed at the headline about the discarded Mute Omega, who had looked past him at parties or declined to defend him at a table where they had eaten his food, those people were now very quiet. And very aware of who had seen them be quiet. Caelan accepted another drink from a server. Took a breath. Felt the room differently than he had entered it. He looked toward Lucien, who was now in quiet conversation with Rydor near the east wall. Lucien glanced up, caught Caelan's eye across the room. No performance in it. Just you okay? Caelan gave a small nod. Then looked out at the crowd. He had walked into this room as someone people had decided didn't matter. The night was not over yet. And Lucien still had one more thing to say. Rydor did not let the moment pass quietly. He crossed the floor when the room had partially settled, when conversations had resumed but the attention in the room had not fully shifted away, and he stood at the center of the gala's gathering space and waited. He didn't tap a glass. Didn't raise his voice. He simply stood there with the specific stillness of a man who had never needed to ask for a room's attention in his life. The room gave it. Some of you have questions, Rydor said. Not a question himself. A statement. About why the Vale family chose tonight to appear. About who that man is. He gestured toward Caelan, not dramatically, just clearly. And about why we knelt. The room was completely focused now. 7 years ago, Rydor said, our brother was attacked. He did not elaborate on by whom. He did not name names. He simply let that sentence exist in the air and let the people in this room do the math they were capable of doing. He was left in a warehouse on the East Dock. He lost a significant amount of blood. He was found, but not by family. Not by anyone connected to our network. A pause. He was found by a stranger. A young man who had no obligation, no connection, no personal reason to stop. That man stabilized him. Donated blood, a rare type, not easily matched. Stayed long enough to confirm our brother was stable. Then left without giving a name. Silence. The clinic had a partial sketch. A description. 7 years of looking. Rydor turned his head slightly toward Caelan. The answer was in this city the entire time. Caelan stood very still. He remembered that night. He had not thought about it as significant. He had been 17. Walking home from a night class, cutting through the dock area because it was faster. He had found a man on the ground behind a chain-link fence, bleeding and unconscious. He had not known who it was. He had not known any of the names attached to the situation. He had simply called for help, stayed until the medics arrived, given blood when they asked because the man's type was rare and he was a match, and then walked home. He had never told anyone. Not because he was hiding it. because it had not occurred to him that it was a story worth telling. He had just done it. That was the part that was moving through the room now. Caelan could feel it without seeing individual faces. The recalibration. The specific discomfort of people who had mocked or dismissed a person, and now had to place that behavior next to this information and sit with what that said about them. A man near the back cleared his throat. Nobody responded to him. Severin spoke next, which was rare enough that the room stilled further. "Our family does not kneel for politics," he said. "We do not kneel for alliances. We do not kneel for money." He looked directly at Caelan. "We kneel for life. And for the character of a man who gave it without asking what it was worth." Caelan said nothing. He simply turned and looked at Dreven Thorn. Just looked at him. That was enough. Dreven, to his credit, did not look away. He held eye contact. But the glass in his hand was no longer steady, and the two associates who had been flanking him had both taken a half step back. Not fleeing. Just creating distance. The kind of distance people create when they have calculated which side of a line they want to be on. Caelan looked at Dreven. He felt something he had not expected to feel in this moment. Not triumph. Not satisfaction, exactly. More like clarity. The kind that arrives when you stop waiting for someone to understand what they did and accept instead that some people only ever understand what things cost them. Dreven was understanding that now. He crossed the floor. Caelan watched him come. He stopped arm's length away. His voice, when it came, was lower than it had been earlier. Something in it was different now, not rehearsed. "You saved his life," Dreven said. "And I." He stopped. Started again. "I didn't know. I want you to know I didn't know about any of it." Caelan looked at him for a long moment. Then he picked up his notepad. Wrote one line. Held it up so Dreven could read it, and so the people close enough to see could read it too. "What you didn't know still shaped every choice you made." Dreven read it. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Lucien stepped forward from 3 feet back, not between them, just present. Visible. And he said, quiet and even, the first thing he had said aloud all evening that was directed at Dreven Thorn. "There's one more thing." He turned to address the room. And what he said next made Dreven Thorn's remaining composure finally, completely, give way. Lucien did not raise his voice. He never did. But the room was already listening and he knew it, and he simply spoke the way a man speaks when he has been waiting years to say something and has finally decided the time is exactly right. "The Thorn Financial Network," he said, "has been under federal review for 14 months. A sound moved through the crowd. Not a gasp, too controlled for that. More like the collective shift of 300 people repositioning their understanding of the room they were standing in. "As of this morning," Lucien continued, 14 accounts have been frozen. 3 port contracts have been voided. 2 former Thorn associates have accepted cooperation agreements. And the documentation supporting those agreements, 7 years of documented evidence, was delivered to the appropriate authorities 11 days ago." He paused. Just a beat. "The Thorn Empire is not in trouble." Another pause. "It is over." The room went to a very specific kind of silence. The kind that happens not from shock but from recognition. These were people who understood finance and power, and the geography of influence. They understood what 14 accounts frozen meant. They understood what cooperation agreements meant. They understood that this had not happened suddenly. This had been built carefully, over time, by a man everyone had been told was bankrupt. Dreven moved. Not toward the exit, toward Caelan. And here is the thing about a man whose carefully constructed life has just been publicly dismantled in front of every person who had given him power or proximity or loyalty, Sometimes he does not accept it. Sometimes he reaches. Driven crossed the floor fast, and his voice had lost all its careful management. You think this is over? He was not shouting. Close. You think I don't know how to rebuild? You think... He stopped himself. Looked at Caelan. And what came out of him then was not strategy. It was desperation. Real desperation. Come back, he said. I am asking you, in front of all of them, come back. Whatever I did, whatever happened, name it. Name the price. The room held completely still. Caelan looked at him. He did not look away. He did not flinch. He stood in the crimson suit with the carved cane in his hand and looked at the man who had left him in a ballroom with 500 witnesses, who had let his foster aunt tear a bracelet from his wrist, who had never once, not that night, not after, sent a single word of acknowledgement. Caelan reached up. He touched his own wrist. The place where the bracelet had been. Just for a second. Then he raised both hands and signed, slowly, openly, making sure every person close enough to see could read every word. I already gave you everything I had. In a ballroom. In front of everyone. And you chose to be somewhere else. He lowered his hands. That was your moment. It's gone. Driven's face did something complicated and painful. You're doing this because of him, he said. He manipulated this. He engineered everything, the gala, the timing, all of it. Lucien's voice came from behind Caelan, calm and clean. No. One word. You destroyed yourself, Lucien said. I simply documented it. Driven turned on him. You came back from the dead to take everything from me. I came back, Lucien said, because I was still alive. What happened to your empire happened because of what your family built it on. I just made sure the record was complete. Silence. Driven looked between them. Then he looked at the room. At 300 people who had once deferred to his name, who had attended his events and accepted his invitations and kept his company in public, and he saw in their faces the specific thing he had always feared most. Not anger. Indifference. The recalibration was done. The room had already moved on in the way that rooms move when they understand that a center of gravity no longer holds. His associates were gone. He hadn't noticed when. His lawyers would be unreachable by morning. He already knew that, somewhere underneath the noise in his chest. He stood alone in the middle of it. Caelan did not watch him fall. He turned. He walked toward Lucien, and Lucien fell in step beside him, and together they moved toward the doors without rushing, without looking back, without performing the exit in any way. The triplets moved to flank them, not protection, just presence. Brotherhood. Behind them, the room began talking again. Quietly at first. Then all at once. The air outside was cold. Clean cold. Not harsh. The kind that comes after rain has cleared everything out and left the city sharper than it usually is. The kind that makes distances look slightly closer than they are. Snow had started while they were inside. Light. Early season. The kind that doesn't stick yet, just drifts down slowly and lands on shoulders and dissolves. Media cameras were positioned outside the hall. They had been there since the triplets' arrival was announced earlier in the evening. Flashes went off when the doors opened. Voices called out names, questions, fragments of sentences. Caelan did not answer any of them. He walked. The triplets stopped at the top of the steps. Rydor stood straight, looking out at the cameras without expression, creating a presence that redirected attention by existing. Severin crossed his arms. Kayleigh watched the crowd with the specific patience of someone who has assessed it and found it manageable. They bowed their heads as Caelan and Lucien passed. Not performance. Acknowledgement. Caelan felt it land in his chest like something settling. like a long-held tension releasing one careful degree at a time. The car was waiting at the bottom of the steps. The same black sedan from 8 months ago. Same driver. Same unhurried engine. Lucien opened the door. Caelan got in. The door closed. The cameras were outside. The snow kept falling. The city moved around them the way cities move, without caring, without pausing, entirely indifferent to the specific weight of what had just happened inside that building. The car pulled away. Quiet. Just road and city light and the soft sound of tires on wet pavement. Lucien looked at him. Then he signed, easy and unhurried, the way he signed everything. Regret anything? Caelan turned toward the window. He watched the city lights pass. The harbor district. The older buildings giving way to the cliffside road. The trees. The iron gate opening ahead. He thought about the ballroom. The silver robes. The bracelet on the marble floor. His foster aunt's face. 500 people who said nothing. He thought about Rain. A stranger with an umbrella and a notepad. A room full of canvases and a skylight, and no one telling him what to do with them. He thought about a warehouse when he was 17, and a man on the ground behind a fence, and the simple decision to stop. He looked back at Lucien. He signed back. Yes. Lucien waited. Caelan continued, I spent years believing that if I was quiet enough and patient enough and good enough, people would see it. I thought I just had to earn it harder. He paused. I regret believing that. Not because it made me weak. Because it wasn't true and I deserved to know that sooner. Lucien watched his hands. Did not interrupt. Caelan finished. Silence was never the problem. The problem was who I was being silent for. The car turned through the gate. The estate lights were on ahead. Warm. The fountain running clean. Same as always. Lucien reached into his jacket. He pulled out an envelope. Held it flat across his palm without opening it, without explaining it, without building to it. Just offered it. The way he had offered a notepad in the rain 8 months ago with 4 words and no pressure. Caelan looked at it. Looked at Lucien's face. There was nothing readable there. Not manipulation. Not strategy. Just the same steady quality that had been there from the beginning. The quality of someone who is present, fully, without agenda. Caelan took the envelope. He looked at the front. His name. His real name, not Vire, the foster name. A name he had not heard in years. His hands stopped. He looked up. Lucien signed 2 words, read it. Caelan turned the envelope over. Broke the seal. Pulled out a single card. Thick paper. 1 line of handwriting, clean and deliberate. He read it. Then read it again. The car had stopped. They were in the motor court. Engine off. Snow coming down outside, soft and quiet against the windows. Caelan sat with the card in both hands and did not move for a long moment. Then he looked at Lucien. His expression. Composed, controlled, the face of a man who had learned to hold himself together in rooms that wanted him to fall apart, shifted. Not breaking. Opening. The way a door opens. Lucien held his gaze. He signed, You're not alone in this. You never were. Caelan folded the card carefully. Pressed it to his chest. Outside, the snow kept falling. And somewhere in this city, in a hospital, or a room, or a place that Caelan had not known to look for, a man who shared his blood was still breathing. There is a truth this story carries that does not require a ballroom, or a kneeling king, or a frozen empire to prove. Some people are quiet not because they are empty, but because they are full of things they have not yet been given the right room to say. Betrayal does not define the person it happened to. It defines the person who chose it. And the ones who are mocked for their silence, the ones passed over, dismissed, abandoned in the rain. They are often the ones who, years before anyone was watching, stopped in the dark and gave everything they had to a stranger without asking why. That matters. That always mattered. If this story moves something in you, share it. Let someone else find it who needs it. And if you're carrying something quiet right now, something you haven't said yet, drop it in the comments. You don't have to explain the whole thing. Just say you're here. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Because the stories coming to this channel are not just entertainment. They are for the people who have been sitting in rain and didn't know a car was waiting. Don't miss what comes next.